How's it going, everybody? Welcome into episode 12, I believe, of Taking Heat, the weekly podcast that we do here, a sports competition style podcast. If this is the first time you're seeing the show, the way this works is each of us bring a take or an opinion to the topic that has been presented for the week, presented by the champion of last week. At the end, everybody puts in a vote. Everyone votes on who they think had the best take for the week, and then the winner brings the take for the next week. Pretty simple concept. My name is Blake Holmes, and I'm joined here tonight by my co-hosts, Cameron Woolwine in the top right, Trevor Tidwell in the bottom left, and Logan Porter in the bottom right. And this week's episode was brought forth by myself and Trevor as we were co-champions last week, and it is the most overrated athlete in sports today. We thought about maybe doing all time. That's something we can do in a future podcast as well. The most overrated athlete of all time. But in this case, we're doing it. We're limiting ourselves to the current day. Are these athletes currently playing their sports, and how are they overrated? That's what we're going to talk about here today. So, basically a pretty simple concept. If you like what you see, if you like what you hear, be sure to, again, like the podcast on YouTube, on Spotify, subscribe to the channel on YouTube, follow the podcast on Spotify. Again, if you're listening on either platform, they are available. There's a video version with my webcam on it for the YouTube video, or if you just rather have audio only, you can do that at Spotify as well. Taking Heat on Spotify, Nuggets Nation 21 on YouTube. So bring y'all into the podcast tonight. Going back again, trying to get this week, going back on a weekly schedule. How y'all doing tonight?
Doing fairly well, I would say so at least.
Doing pretty good, Getting to watch the Steelers fight for the number one overall pick, so that's always fun.
Postseason baseball, pretty sad. St. Louis really shit the bed against Philadelphia. Not saying that the Phillies are a bad team, but we can't shit the bed.
Well, let me tell you, Cam, I will agree. This right here may get used a little bit this season, based on how this season's going. I mean, there's some bright spots, but yeah, the Steelers, all in all, are having a lot of issues that will need to be addressed in the future. But that's a topic for another time, another episode. Once again, we are here to discuss the most overrated athlete in sports today. This is something to where this can mean a number of things. It can mean a player who is looked at as you could say that this player is seen as really good, and they're bottom of the barrel. They're not nearly as good as everyone says it is. It can even be as small as this person is seen as the best player in the league, and you don't think they're top 10, they're top 5. These types of situations to where they receive all this praise and all these high ratings, but you don't think that it is worthy. So, as is customary, I have my trusty wheel here. We're going to go ahead and bring that in. This wheel has each of our names on it. Whoever it lands on, of course, will be the one that's presenting their take. And from there, we will remove names as we go. So, spinning the wheel for the first time, you can hear me clicking it several times. So, it will land on someone. It will land on myself. So, we'll go ahead and get started. And I want to go ahead and kind of talk about what I think what really went into this decision making. I thought for a number of different sports. I thought for the NFL. I thought for the NBA, the MLB, things like that. And I will go ahead and say this one may be a little controversial. There's definitely a personal bias here for me, but I'm tired of seeing this guy listed as highly as he is all the time. I've thought about in the NFL guys like Myles Garrett and Mac Jones was another one. Mac Jones is a little young to me. It's only his second season, so it's hard to really say for sure if he's overrated at this point. But Mac Jones was another one that came to my mind. But this one is someone that I'm not a fan of for a number of reasons in the NBA. And I think part of the reason is, once again, because of his reputation and because he has been anointed in a lot of people's minds as the savior, as one of the saviors of NBA basketball in the upcoming years. And it is someone who is polarizing. Either you love this guy or you hate him, and there's really no in between. Of course, Cam, you guessed him before the show. I'm talking about Devin Booker. Devin Booker for the Phoenix Suns. Don't get me wrong. I'm not sitting here and trying to say that Booker is not a top 20 NBA basketball player. I'm not saying that he isn't one of the best young shooting guards, one of the best shooting guards in general in the NBA. That's 100% true. But I have seen lists out there. Some people that are willing to put Devin Booker in the top 10 and willing to put Devin Booker even top 12 for that matter. He gets the cover of 2K. Just the consistent praise that he gets for stuff that I have a lot of issues with. He's a fine player. I don't have any notes pulled up because, again, I'm not going to go too much into that. Again, statistically, he's fine. But, yeah, when you talk about last season was his career best statistically. He had about 26.8 points per game, under 5 assists per game, 4.8, a steal, and half a block plus 5 rebounds per game. He shot 46% from the field and 38% from 3 on about 35 minutes per game. Now, am I going to sit here and say that is a bad stat line? Absolutely not. That's one of the best stat lines in the league. The thing that gets me about Devin Booker is you go and you look at the things that happen either off the court or on the court when it doesn't matter. The main things I'm looking at, of course, when you're talking about hit the first 5 seasons, I don't blame all of this on him by any means. It's hard to win when you're changing head coaches every single year and he doesn't have the talent around him. But the Suns go from statistically the worst basketball team in the league, and it's not particularly close. And one season he gets into the playoffs. Ironically, it's crazy, when Chris Paul comes to town, they make a complete turnaround. This team looks so much better, and it's a really good team. They get the 2nd seed in the West. They play against the Los Angeles Lakers with LeBron James and Anthony Davis both hurt, missing games, and not 100%. They then go to the 2nd round and they face the Denver Nuggets without Jamal Murray or Michael Porter Jr. The starting guards in that series were Facundo Campazzo and Austin Rivers. They win that series pretty handily, as they should. They go into the Western Conference semis, or in the Western Conference Finals, with no Kawhi Leonard for the Los Angeles Clippers. I mean, the writing on the wall, and then they finally face a healthy team in the NBA Finals, and Giannis does what Giannis does, ends up winning an NBA championship over them. The next season, they come in, again, best record in the league. They look unstoppable. They look really good. Only wait. Luka Doncic, don't get me wrong, he had a great supporting cast in Game 7. You're going to drop a Game 7 on your home floor 123-90, and that was with them outscoring the Mavs 40-31 in the 4th quarter with no starters in the game. Devin Booker goes 3 of 14 in this game for 11 points, a minus 41 in Game 7. And I look at it, and before, the main thing that everyone talks about, for obviously the blowout in Game 7, but before, when they were up 3-2 and they're talking all kinds of smack, and Booker's flopping and calling it the Luka special, and they're talking in the press conference, and Luka says the now famous line, "Everybody talking when they up." Everybody talks when they up. And he just goes supernova for the rest of that series. But again, the thing that gets me about Booker, he's incredibly cocky. If you watch the way he plays, if you watch the way he celebrates, he's so cocky for a finals berth in a relatively easy road to the finals that he didn't even win. And when you're talking about team success, he hasn't done it without Chris Paul. I'm not saying that is 100% his fault, because, again, the team that he had, I don't think people realize just how bad the team was outside of Devin Booker, and plus they were changing head coaches every single year. But the extracurriculars, the cockiness, and things like that. But even with all that, he still gets a ton of fanfare. He's still looked at as a top 10 player in the NBA by some guys. I mean, I can name you 12 players off top of my head, and you can tell me where you want to rank him over. I'll go ahead and do it now. You've got LeBron James, Nikola Jokic, Joel Embiid, Stephen Curry, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Kevin Durant. You want to talk about Jason Tatum, Luka Doncic. You want to talk about someone like a John Morant you could put in front of him. Depending on what you're looking for, you can look at a guy like Jimmy Butler. Chris Paul has some consideration to be in front of him as far as, statistically he's not as good, but again, Chris Paul is the glue of that team. I mean, the list there's names I know I've forgotten, but the fact that he is looked at as highly as he is for a couple of good seasons, regular season wise, and making the finals in my opinion, the easiest finals route of all time. I mean, again, you can't name me a route that was easier unless you want to go all the way back to Bill Russell, just because Bill Russell was so much bigger than everybody else and consistently making it to the finals in that case. But again, when you're talking about Booker and the modern NBA, in my opinion, the easiest road to the finals, and despite not really achieving anything other than that, is still looked at. He's not an All NBA first team player. He's not. He is an All Star, things like that. And I'm not saying he's a bad player, but top 10, top 12 player in the NBA, in my mind, we need to pump the brakes a little bit.
I completely agree, honestly. I'll be honest, I don't think Devin Booker is a top 15 player in the NBA right now. And as you had mentioned, he had an incredibly easy road to the finals. And I'll be honest, I just don't think Devin Booker really can lead a team compared to like some other NBA players like LeBron or Luka, as you had mentioned. Like, I just don't think Devin Booker can do it by himself, at least right now. And like you had said, Devin Booker is obviously like a really good NBA player, but I can agree 100% that I think he is a little overrated just by most NBA fans.
And
So
then,
I want
go
to
ahead.
point out something real quick with Cameron's retort right there. I don't think there's a guy in the NBA that's, other than LeBron James, there were 2 seasons when he was in Cleveland. Other than LeBron James, I don't think there's a single guy in the NBA that's ever done anything by themselves.
yeah, so
You know what I mean?
I do agree, and I think that yes, that is something where it's the same thing with the Kevin Durant thing. Kevin Durant, for the longest time, he had Russell Westbrook, and he just couldn't get it done. That's why he goes and joins the Golden State team that becomes a dynasty. But the main thing I'm getting at is, you may not be able to win a championship all by yourself, but there have been several instances to where players can will their teams at least into the playoffs. And when you're talking about, I mean, you can look at the NBA right now. Again, now, Joel Embiid was well on his way to doing that, and then he got Harden last year, so it made things a little bit easier for him in the second half of the season. Jokic did it without his second and third best players. We've seen Kobe do it, Kobe dragging the corpse of Pau Gasol and things like that with him all the way to the finals. We've seen players do it, at least get into the playoffs. And what I think about Booker, and again, this is why I'm saying that criticism is a little bit unfair to him, just because, again, before Chris Paul, the team just was not in good shape, and ever since Chris Paul came, they've just become a powerhouse for that matter. But again, the thing that gets me is I am all for a player having confidence. To me, a player needs to be confident. They need to be able to talk some trash. They need to be able to and obviously make their mark. But at the same time, you've got to have the ability to act like you've been there before. And in the case of Booker, his antics cross from confidence to cockiness to me. And at the end of the day, I think that the cockiness, that's what caught up to him. Because again, in Game 7, like I said, you go back and you name, Kobe Bryant had one bad performance in a Game 7 I can think of in his entire career. But when you go and look at this once again, 3 of 14, 0 of 4 from three-point land, 4 turnovers, and a minus 41 in a Game 7. I understand that the Mavericks were firing on all the cylinders, and Luka Doncic is one of the best young players in the NBA today. But after you've talked that much smack, and after you've got so much fanfare going in your favor, how are you going to be a minus 41 in a Game 7 on your home floor? Just for the fact that again, I don't think the Suns have. Don't get me wrong. A finals berth is a finals berth. That's more than the Nuggets have, as you can see by the hat. It's more than the Nuggets have in their entire history. But it's a message to him, and it's a message really to Suns fans in general. A finals berth is just that. It's a runner-up at that point. You can afford to talk the trash that Stephen Curry does and the shimmies that Stephen Curry does when you have the hardware that Stephen Curry does. Devin Booker just doesn't have that.
Another thing you got to realize, that finals berth that they had in the 2020-21 season where they won the finals, you got to realize that was the first time they had been in the playoffs since 2010, I believe. And they made it to the finals, too. And I'm still agreeing with you here. I mean, Devin Booker, he's a good player. You know, he's averaging in the mid-20s each season in points, which is no small joke. I mean, that's a good stat to have. I don't think he's that kind of, like, the kind of the good players on good teams. They're usually the floor general. Especially if they're the top scorer. You know, LeBron James, he controlled that offense. But in this case, he was the guy that was getting the buckets, but Chris Paul was that kind of floor general. And I can understand what you're saying. When Chris Paul comes, they immediately go to the finals. Chris Paul had that experience, and Devin Booker, he has the skills, he doesn't have that mentality of being a floor general and going out there.
It's the same thing, you know, and I sit here and again, you can talk about it with Chris Paul. He takes the Thunder, and let's be real, the Thunder, when they made the playoffs in the bubble, they had no business being that far. It was him and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and that was it. That was the only two weapons, and yet they found a way to at least make the playoffs. And Chris Paul does the same thing with this Suns team. And again, I'm not, like I said, I think people... That's the problem I have with some hot take shows, things like that, is people hear you say, I think Devin Booker is overrated, and they think you're saying Devin Booker is, you know, couldn't hold a candle to some of the stars in the league. No, I'm not saying that, but the people who are out here trying to say that Devin Booker is a top 10 NBA player, and again, when you're talking about, yeah, he gets the cover of 2K, which is it's so asinine. It means nothing. We all know 2K doesn't really mean anything. But the fact
J. Cole was on the cover of 2K.
the fact of the matter is, there's a lot of fanfare. There's a lot of positive attention that's thrown Devin Booker's way. When in reality, once again, I'm not taking anything away from that finals run. Like I said, a finals run is a finals run, no matter what the path is. You can't help who you play. You can only handle how you play them. But at the same time, when you act like you've won 5 championships because you made the finals one time, that's when I start to have an issue with it. Finals run in itself is perfectly okay. But in the case of Booker, it goes to another step, and it goes past that because, once again, he's acting like he's been a part of a dynasty when he's had 2 good regular seasons in his entire career. Do you have any questions or anything like that?
Not super knowledgeable about basketball. Not one of the sports I'm extremely into. However, just looking at his stats that I have pulled up right here, seems like a solid shooter. And like that is it. Like I don't see any other stats of him being overall one of the best basketball players. Especially with what you guys have said about, I guess, like his lack of leadership.
He is
All he offers though is shooting. That's pretty much all I can think he can offer is just.
He is a solid. I will say he is a solid facilitator whenever he has other weapons in the game with him. Whenever he can afford to, because if he can pass if he needs to at times. The thing that I have about Booker is, and this is the same thing, this is the reason we did in episode 3, I believe. Logan, I know you were, it was you, me, and Jacob Underwood. We did the top 10 NBA players in the league, and I think I had Jimmy Butler at number 10, and Underwood thought that was, did not like that pick. But the reason I said that was when Devin Booker's shot isn't falling, when Devin Booker isn't finding the bottom of the net, he doesn't know how to impact the game in other ways. Jimmy Butler, on the other hand, if his shot's not falling, guess what? He's going to play terrific defense. He's going to attack the glass. He's going to do everything he can to impact the game in a positive way outside of scoring. And like you said, Cam, when it comes to Booker, yes, he can move the ball decently well, and yes, he can play defense when he absolutely has to. But to me, what gets me as well is when the shot's not falling, he cannot seem to figure out how to impact games in other ways.
So this is embarrassing. I just pulled up the because I actually had it in my notes on my smartphone, the order of all of the players that we did for that NBA ranking in episode 3. I actually put Booker at number 10. so I'm
not. Listen again. This is why I said it's a hot take, and the reason it's a hot take is because a lot of people right now in NBA do agree with that. They have him at number 10 or at number 11. To me, if it were and I think I may have actually said in the episode before that I would not have had Booker that high. I would have had Booker.
Neither of y'all had him even on the list. Y'all had guys like Bradley Beal that I didn't have on there, and Jimmy Butler, I didn't have him on there at the time either.
And again, that it comes down just at the end of the day, it's the same reason why I respect guys like Giannis Antetokounmpo so much, because you look at it and you say, you're not scoring and you're not, your shot's not falling or you're just not getting to the rim or whatever it is. How are you going to still win basketball games if you can't get the ball in the bottom of the bucket yourself? Other stars in the league, for the most part, know how to do that. Again, Stephen Curry is a ridiculously good passer. Joel Embiid with his defense and with his rebounding ability. Nikola Jokic with his offensive and his ball movement. LeBron James with his ball movement. You can go on and on and on, and it's just one of those things to where, at the end of the day, if your shot's not falling, if your offense isn't fully there, how are you going to impact winning? And I have a question about whether or not Devin Booker can do that.
So, I do have a little bit of a defense for Devin Booker. And this isn't me just because I had him in the top 10, but I'm just looking at him on paper. Mm-hmm. I'm looking at him on paper on Basketball Reference right now. Mm-hmm. He has been improving. Obviously, his points, they've been pretty consistent since the 2018-2019 season. He's been about the same there. Mm-hmm. But defensively, his blocks has gone up since previous seasons. Same thing with steals. Same thing with total rebounds. And even his shooting has gone up in some direction, in some cases. The only thing that really hasn't is assists, and the only reason that is because he was averaging 6.5 around that area until Chris Paul came, and then Chris Paul was the assist guy. 2 years ago when they went to the finals, Chris Paul had 8.5. Last year, Chris Paul averaged 10. So I think he is improving and still being a solid player. I think he's still an all-star. I think at this point in time, I probably wouldn't have him top 10, especially, as I've watched more NBA and kind of been more around the league. But I don't think he's not washed up or anything like that.
No, absolutely. And again, I'm not, and that's what I'm saying. Like I said, I don't want people to take away from this rant that I went on that I think that Devin Booker is a bad player by any stretch of the imagination. I'm looking here to give a little bit of response to those points. The main thing is with his shooting. He averaged more points per game in this past year than, I believe that's his career high. He had, let's see, I'm looking here, 26.8. Yeah, it was his career high. But when you take a look at his totals, he took almost 200 more shots this past season than he has in many of his years prior. And his field goal percentage went down because of that. But obviously, in the grand scheme of things, if you're taking almost 200 more shots in the season, then your points per game will probably increase. And then the defensive side of things, I will say, when it comes to that Suns roster, let's talk about who they have in the lineup. You've got Chris Paul, Devin Booker. You've got Mikal Bridges, who is a sneaky good defender in his own right. You've got Cam Johnson, who is a solid defender. DeAndre Ayton. The thing about Booker that gets swept under the rug, and it's the same reason that Luka. Luka's not. Luka is an atrocious defender at times, and that's how it is. A lot of players, if you look, you have to find advanced stats, and this is why, again, I you can see the hat. I'm calling on Nuggets fans. advanced stats do matter, but they don't tell the whole story. There are people out there that legitimately believe that Nikola Jokic is a top 3 defender as a big man because he led in defensive box plus minus, which is just not true. Or he was top 3 in defensive rating, which is just not how that works. In the case of Booker, it is very, 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 very rare for him to guard the players that are worth guarding. It's worth talking about. He's not stepping up against the James Hardens in the NBA. He's not stepping up against the Bradley Beals even, or anybody along that nature, because that's Chris Paul's assignment. Chris Paul is the defensive player. He's the one that's stepping up and taking that assignment. Or Mikal Bridges is taking that player. Booker is typically, and you could make the case that they do that because they don't want to tire him out. It's the Kawhi Leonard effect. You know Kawhi could go and lock up whoever you want, but at the same time, you don't want him to do it all the time because you still want him to be able to contribute offensively. You don't want him exhausted for that. But in the case of this, that's my argument. Like I said, though, I'm not saying that Devin Booker is not an incredibly fun player to watch when he's on, an incredibly talented and young player. I'm not saying that one bit. And do I think that the Suns are still title contenders as much as I hate it? Absolutely. I think they are. But I think that's why I'm saying for now, we need to pump the brakes a little bit, at least see what he gives us again this season after he faces the first adversity since those early seasons, and see if we go from there. I'm not ready to anoint him as the like I said, one of the league's next great saviors.
So when it comes into terms of basketball, this was actually a concept I saw in a video talking about LeBron. Just talking about it was kind of a video hyping up him, but kind of when a player comes into early draft picks, it's usually because the team is in a bad state. And they were using LeBron as an example. He was obviously, the number 1 pick, 2003. Went to Cleveland, who was notoriously bad at this point in time. And the point that they made was when there's a bad team, somebody has to score. All right? And somebody has to do the majority of this scoring. And the example I'm going to use, there's no shot on him. I'm only using him because this is just how I feel. But Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, when he went to the Thunder, kind of popped off, averaging mid-20s. He's scoring a lot, and everyone was hyping him up. But, who else is on the Thunder? I'm looking at their roster last season. They had 10 guys average 10 or more a game, which is insane. And
I'll tell you, the year that he made the NBA playoffs, he had Chris Paul by his side. And it's the same thing again with Booker. Again, like I said, it's not 100% fair to Booker to say this, but I need to see, for me to put him that much higher once again. For one, I'm sorry, top 10 players, and I will defend at the end of the day, there are some instances that it's okay to lose. Joel Embiid losing against a very solid team in the Eastern Conference. Jokic losing to the eventual champions in the first round with his second and third best player out. Trying to think of LeBron losing in the first round and against the Suns the first year because he doesn't have Anthony Davis and he's not fully healthy. The Suns had no excuse, had no reason. There was nothing about that game that should have led to that much of a beating that they took. And yet it happened. And Booker was one of the main reasons for that. I keep bringing this up, but once again, minus 41. He was the worst plus minus in the game. By him and Chris Paul, minus 41, minus 39. Mikal Bridges had minus 40. Luka Doncic was outscoring the entire team himself by halftime. Like I said, there's still a long way for Booker to go. I think he is going to be fine. I think he may end up getting in that top 10. But for now, we need to pump the brakes. We need to see what he comes back with this season. And people are too quick to anoint him the next Kobe Bryant like they have been.
Something else from that, just real quick, from that playoff series. He also in their series against the Pelicans. Did not dress for 3 of the games, but did come back for the final game.
And that team was good enough. Again, that team is a very well-built team. They're very well coached. They finally found a guy in Monty Williams that can put together a really good scheme. Again, not saying that Booker isn't great. Booker is a fantastic NBA player, and he will be for a very long time. Top 10 player in the NBA. Let's slow it down.
I don't mean to keep butting in, obviously, but I think a reason that he kind of gets that treatment is because he had that 70-point game.
And it's that, and again, and like I said, in some cases, especially in the casual NBA fan base, they like a cocky player. Try to think, I'm not saying anything about him, but like, and people like him because it's a meme. But Alex Caruso is a perfect example of that. Alex Caruso is actually a very solid NBA player when you're talking about everything he provides from a defensive standpoint. He's one of the more underrated defenders in the league. He obviously, we know about his athleticism and his looks and things like that. But the main thing is he's especially when he was with the Lakers, he was cocky, and people just attached to that. And I think, like I said, I think a lot of casual fans do like that. And that's why he gets the positive fanfare, and I think that's why he gets the obviously the 2K sponsorships, and I think he has a decent social media following. But again, when you're talking about it from big moment standpoints, and there is also the point to be made where people can say, well, at least Booker had himself in a Game 7, and he put his team at least in the opportunity to do that. But did he really? They had a 3-2 series lead against Luka Doncic and the Mavs. They blew the 3-2 lead, and then again in Game 7, it is an all-time bad loss to lose the Game 7 in the way they did. So like I said, a lot of potential, a lot of future. Slow it down on the hype train a little bit. We talked about that for a very long time. We'll go ahead and move to the next person. So starting off the episode was myself, and it was Devin Booker. As I bring the wheel back onto the screen, spinning it quite a few times, it will land on Trevor. So Trevor, most overrated current athlete, the floor is yours.
All right. Not sure if this will be a hot take or not. The player that I am choosing is a baseball player. He currently, I'm going to put quotes around, plays for the San Diego Padres. This is Fernando Tatis Jr. This guy, he is 23 this year. He is an outstanding baseball player. He is great offensively. He is great defensively. I think he's pretty hot-headed. I don't feel like overall he's a great team player, but just as a pure baseball player, he is very good. He was a rookie for the San Diego Padres back in 2019, and in this season, only playing 84 games, he was able to rack up. Where was it? He had end of the season. He had a 317 batting average. For as a rookie, that's pretty dang good. And out of these 84 games, he was able to rack up 22 home runs. So if he was a rookie and he had played, say, all 162 games, regular season games, he may have set a MLB rookie record for number of home runs in the first season, which would have been freaking awesome. That year, he was third in the Rookie of the Year voting, behind Pete Alonso, who is currently one of the best first basemen. He plays for the Mets. Also an incredible baseball player. But since his debut opening day of 2019, only counting regular season games, only counting regular season games that were played, the season of 2020 was cut a little short because of COVID-19 and such. But San Diego, since the beginning of 2019, have played 546 regular season baseball games. Tatis has only played in 273 of these baseball games. So since he started, he's played 50% of the regular season games for his team. Some of this has to do with injuries. He's been put on the injury list a couple times for a few minor things. He dislocated a shoulder, I believe, sometime in last year or in 2020. Also in 2020, he, as well as a bunch of other baseball players, got COVID. He was on the injury list for that for a little while. One of the big things is at the beginning of this year, he had to have surgery on a bone in his wrist. He had fractured a bone in his wrist over the off season, and it was projected that he was going to be out for about 3 months and then make his return. And him needing surgery on his wrist, it was alluded that he had suffered this injury due to a motorcycle accident in December of 2021 while in the Dominican Republic. Whenever he was asked about this motorcycle accident after it had been public, he just responded with which one, suggesting that he had been in multiple motorcycle accidents that off season. So like him missing like half of the 2022 season for an injury that he gotten because of his own like him just getting in a motorcycle accident is pretty different than like, hey, I'm playing baseball and I got hit in the arm with a pitch or whatever, and now like I have a fractured bone, or like I dove for a ball and now like dislocated my shoulder or something and I'm out for a while. This is in my whole opinion, this is just him being dumb and missing half of the season for his team. And then basically like right whenever he was supposed to come back this season, he was suspended for 80 games, which is just under half a season, because he tested positive for an anabolic steroid. He claimed that the positive test came from a medication that he took to treat ringworm, which to me sounds like he didn't have the force, like the mind to think ahead to be like, oh, what is in this medication that I'm taking that someone prescribed me? And oh, hey, look, it ends up being a small amount of steroids. So basically, in the past 4 seasons since 2019, he's only played 50% of the games with his team, including him being able to play 0 games in this 2022 season with San Diego Padres. Currently, the Padres, they played. Oh, Blake, who did they just play?
They beat the Mets in the wild card.
The Mets, baby. Yeah, so they beat the Mets in the National League wild card games, and then they're now currently facing the Los Angeles Dodgers. And the Padres have some talent. They have Tatis, I guess. Not right now, they don't. But he's on the team. He's some talent.
I love the way you said that.
I guess.
I mean, he's there in spirit, maybe. But like they have players like Manny Machado, also a hothead, but like he's also a pretty good baseball player, pretty good third baseman, solid hitter. They also this season acquired Juan Soto. He is also young, like Tatis. He's a great hitter. He's a great outfielder. They have some good pitching. They have overall a really solid team, and I think that with Tatis this season, they could have been a real threat. But because of his motorcycle accident that he had to miss half the season for, and then now him testing positive for steroids that he had to miss another half of the season for, I think that even though he's a great baseball player, he is one of the best young hitters, one of the best young fielders in the league. missing an entire season and not being able to contribute to your team is a pretty big loss. And this is why I believe that Fernando Tatis Jr., although a great player, should not be up for discussion currently for one of the best in the league.
So I will go ahead and say, when you're talking about Tatis, I mean, what makes him so revered so highly? And I think it goes back to what I was talking about with the NBA, where he's glitzy. Like he is a very marketable player for what he does on the field. Again, not for anything he does off the field, really, but for what he does on the field. It's the same reason that when he first came into the league, you saw people talk about Vladimir Guerrero Jr. as much as they did. It's the same reason that, although he deserves every bit of the hype, and oh my goodness, how can a player like this exist? Shohei Ohtani is a perfect example of that too. It's something to where the things he does, what Tatis does, his highlight plays on the field are remarkable, are unbelievable. They'll make your jaw drop with the catches he makes and the distance of the ball. And he's up 13-0 with the bases loaded, and he hits a grand slam. Or no, excuse me, that was a different. That was a White Sox player, but still ended up having to apologize at one point for hitting a grand slam while up big. For what he does on the field, then yeah, absolutely. But I've said for the longest time, one of the main things that gets overlooked when you're talking about the best players and where players should be ranked is, I think that in some ways the best ability is availability. As much as bad as the Angels have been for so long, Mike Trout doesn't miss a ton of games. And Mike Trout is revered as, it doesn't matter who you talk about. Mike Trout's still probably the best player, the best individual baseball player in baseball. But Mike Trout has never had postseason success because, for one, the Angels are just bad. It makes their pitching staff is never good. But again, he shows up, he plays. Tatis doesn't do that, and it's not because of a nagging knee injury. It's not because he had a specific. It's like you said. It's irresponsible decisions, things like that. Also, I can't imagine a better teammate for Manny Machado. As much as Manny Machado is a very good baseball player, he is the absolute worst, and I hate him in the MLB. But
I totally agree.
But like you said, best ability in some cases is availability, and for everything he gives you on the field and everything that. Tatis, and there have been moments where I have loved it. Again, when he had a situation with Trevor Bauer, he called Trevor Bauer, he called himself Trevor Bauer's dad after homering twice in a game off of him, and it was fantastic. It was phenomenal. But again, for everything that he has done off the field and for the little he's been able to get out onto the field, I don't hate this pick because, again, you got to be on the field to prove that you deserve to be in that discussion. Especially, it's not a good look after you just got caught testing positive for those steroids.
It's really sad, both, I think, for him and for the team itself. So in the 3 years previous that he had played, his stats are great. Third in Rookie of the Year voting in 2019. The other 2 years he played in 2020 and 2021, he got Silver Slugger Award both of the years. He also was fourth and third, respectively, in National League MVP voting. So, this guy's really good. He was also, beginning of the 2021 season, was signed by the San Diego Padres for a 14-year, $340 million contract, which puts him at, the third highest paid baseball player currently. So per year, it works out to about 1.7 million or something weird like that. So last year, he played 130 games, had a National League leading 42 home runs, had a 280 batting average, slugging was over 600, and I think that the current money that he's making, well deserved. But this year he was paid $1.7 million to do nothing. He has done nothing productive this season at all. I think that's one of the other big things, is that he's been able to, he's done so well to earn the money that he's paid, and then like just dropped out.
And
Like,
it comes down to, once again, when you're talking about, like I said, I think that a lot of people, and this is where baseball can get tricky, because there's a lot of, if you only know baseball through ESPN's Instagram account and things like that, they're only going to post the greatest plays and just the glitzy, like I said, the glitzy plays. And Tatis does a lot of that. And I think that's why people are so quick to rate him. Again, phenomenal player when it comes to stats on the diamond and things like that. But people don't know a lot of what Tatis has done and the reason he misses games, because all they see is, oh, look at the diving catch on ESPN. Look how he hit this ball over 400 feet on ESPN. And it's the same thing, like I said, when you're talking about some of these other players. Again, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. got it for the longest time to where he would hit a home run, and that was nice and great. He was a young player, but it wasn't anything that was mind-boggling. But because it was Vladimir Guerrero Jr., they had to post about it.
Something interesting I wanted to bring up, because I've been looking at some of his statistics. Be throwing some numbers out there, so just be prepared. In the 2020 season, obviously, he was cut short. He was ranked 4th, you said, in the so something that I think is interesting is, batting wise, I just don't see why he's 4th. He had 201 votes. Granted, that year in the NL, I don't know how the voting works, by the way, because I think it differs between sports. But Freddie Freeman, he had 28 first place votes, which was almost unanimous in the NL, where Tatis had 0. But he had 201 vote points, which got him to 4th with a 227 batting average and so on and so forth. But Juan Soto, who was 5th place that year, led the entire major league in ops, in slugging, in on-base percentage. He led the NL in batting average and in walks. I don't see why Juan Soto is below him in that standard.
So the reason probably is, and this is where, again, it just comes down to glitz and glamour. If I'm not mistaken, Tatis probably had more home runs than he did, and maybe
Only 4.
and maybe RBIs as well. I don't know how many more RBIs he had, because again, and that year, that's the year Freddie Freeman won an MVP for the Atlanta Braves. So obviously he was basically going to be untouched. I don't who was second. Josh Bell was up there as well. I know that, but basically,
so in the NL, it was Freeman, Betts, Machado, Tatis.
yes. And so again, Tatis probably had more RBIs and home runs, but still, it's not drastic enough to, Juan Soto even at the time was known as one of the best hitters in baseball. It's crazy to think, by the way, that 3 through 5 would end up being teammates. But anyways, let's keep talking about it. But again, Soto was still and still is known as one of the best hitters in baseball. So it shouldn't have been a wide margin. And again, I think it just came down to Tatis had the bigger splash plays at the end of the day.
Because as like a team player, like that on pace percentage was almost 50%, which is kind of freaking awesome. Just gonna say.
I think the other big reason that Tatis ended up with more votes is Juan Soto is a great fielder. He makes great plays in the outfield. Fernando Tatis Jr. I would say makes more amazing plays as a shortstop than Soto does in right field. Not to say that Soto's bad. I just think that Tatis has more opportunities to show his glove, and that was a big
That's
reason that he
fair.
got more votes.
There's usually a pretty good glove at the shortstop position,
Mhm.
or at least I feel like that way. It is. Also in 2021, I had some more looking at. He had a better batting average that year, at 282. He was 3rd overall. He actually received 2 first place votes. I think that's how it works.
Mhm.
I think that's what that 2 tells me. But I just still don't see why he would receive those votes. I mean, it wasn't as nearly unanimous as it was Freddie Freeman. Bryce Harper won that year in the NL, but I don't really see how some of these other players wouldn't be above him. And like you said with the fielding thing, like the stats I'm looking at, it doesn't show fielding. Like I have no idea. And it's kind of hard to show fielding other than just fielding percentage, and even that doesn't tell the whole story.
Cam, any comments, or Trev, any last remarks?
I'm not very familiar with baseball, so the only thing I can really do is just kind of listen to everyone talk about like why he's overrated and that sort of thing, to be honest.
Trev, any last remarks? Any last arguments before we move on?
I think just like as a wrap, he's a great baseball player. He currently has no contribution to his team. And that is basically the sole reason why I think currently, as of season 2022, he is overrated.
So two takes in, and we've already got a couple of big names. This is what I've been looking for. This is what I was hoping from this topic. I bring in the wheel once again, spinning it now. This will be the second to last person, and it will be Logan, who will be bringing his pick to the table. Logan, take it away. The floor is yours.
All right, so I would like to start off with my honorable mention because I was debating 2 players, and I'm not gonna lie, both of them I just personally kind of just don't like, and but that's kind of how takes go. There's bias in it. I don't think as people, I'm not saying there's anything wrong. It's just in their sport, there's just something I don't like about it. You know what I mean? Um, and some of it could just be the hype. I'm not a big fan of just coming out of nowhere being the top dog. My honorable mention was going to be Patrick Mahomes. He did win an MVP, but I just think after that MVP year, I just don't think he's all that. I think he's good. I just don't think he's deserving of the hype that he's getting, though. But that's not my pick. That's an honorable mention. My pick, though, is another big name player from the NBA. I'm going to say Kyrie Irving is very overrated. Now, kind of like on the Devin Booker situation, on paper, he's pretty freaking good. This last season, even though he only played 29 games, he was averaging 20.4 points the entire season, which has been pretty consistent with the last 2 years. But that being said, I think Kyrie is probably one of the best dribblers in basketball to ever touch a basketball. I don't think that that's a good enough reason to allow him to reach these levels that people constantly put him on. Because a lot of people, especially I'm in a sports debate group chat at my university, and there's one guy in there who consistently, every time basketball is brought up, wants us to debate why we think that our favorite team is better than Kyrie Irving. And there's just a lot of fanboys of Kyrie Irving out there, and I just don't think that he's really all that much. He had a good year in Cleveland before he left. Cameron, you talked about it earlier, I believe, in an earlier episode where he with the LeBron block in the finals with the Kyrie 3 to win the game. I think he had a good year there, and I think he was pretty solid. I just don't think he was the guy. You know what I mean? Goes to Boston. I mean, he was their guy, but didn't do anything with it. When he went to Brooklyn was already going to the playoffs, and since he's been with Brooklyn, they've gotten to the Eastern Conference semifinals, but they lost. And then the year after that, they lost in the Eastern Conference first round, which is what they were doing when they had guys like Jared Allen and D'Angelo Russell being the star players of the team. So I don't think I think he's good. I mean, there's no doubt about that. I wouldn't be talking about him if he wasn't good. But I don't think he's really that guy that everyone puts him on this pedestal for.
Oh, I will say I love this pick, and I'll take it a step further. Anybody who wants to argue this with me, this one's a bigger take to me, a hotter take to some people than it may seem. Kyrie Irving's career has been carried by that final shot. I think that at the end of the day, has he been solid? Like you said, absolutely. He's been the star in a couple of situations. He's made the playoffs. He's had some moments. If Kyrie Irving doesn't make that shot in Game 7 and the Golden State Warriors end up winning the NBA Finals, I don't know if we ever look at Kyrie Irving as a top 20 NBA player.
I think we do.
I tell you, send all the hate towards me. Again, I've never been, like I said, and like you said, one of the best ball handlers that the game has ever seen. Maybe the best ball handler the game has ever seen. But when you're talking about his career accomplishments, he's an NBA champion one time, and he hit one of the most clutch shots in NBA history. No one's taken that away from him whatsoever. But every other time he was been either supposed to have been the guy or had another chance to make it a run, he hasn't done it. And again, and also ties back to the same argument that Trevor has. You know, you can stand what you want, but about the vaccine issue and things like that. But at the end of the day, when you're just not playing, he only played 29 games last year when everything was said and done. I mean, you have to play a lot of games. It's the same reason that as much as I think if he's back to what he is on paper, he's 100% in this same tier. I can't put Kawhi Leonard in a top 10 player list right now because he hasn't played for a full season. But when he comes back and plays, and if he gets back to that point, then I'm willing to put him there. You have to play basketball games to be considered high. But again, I'll take the heat 100%. To me, Kyrie Irving's career has basically been carried by that one shot.
Something else that just kind of came to me. Another reason why there's a lot of athletes that I feel like are like this, in my opinion. Another one I'm going to throw out there is Antonio Brown, because he's another popular athlete.
We might argue about this.
Well, we can. Oh no! Listen, we can have an entire 3-hour discussion about the brain study of Antonio Brown when everything's said and done.
This isn't this. When I bring up Antonio Brown, I'm not talking about his stats whatsoever. I'm not even talking about football almost. What I'm going to say is I feel like there are a lot of athletes who become very good at what they do, and then all of a sudden, like, and this isn't me telling people to not do this, but once they get big, it doesn't become about the sport anymore. Kyrie Irving, you know, like we said, he hits that shot, and then now he's not a basketball player, he's a basketball personality. You know, it's all about him, not the game. Antonio Brown got big, and then it kind of became the Antonio Brown personality. There are other players like that too. Patrick Mahomes, I feel like that's the same thing with him. Ezekiel Elliott, same thing with him. It just goes down the line. There are a lot of players who do great things in the game, and then once they hit that peak, they still be good. They're still good, you know. They don't just forget everything they learned. It just feels like all of a sudden they're not focused on the game. They're focused on themselves.
And the thing about Antonio Brown is, you bring him up, and it's a good case. I will say there have been reports that the AB. Now he was not as much of a psychopath as he was in like Oakland and towards the end of his Pittsburgh career, but there were some reports that he was kind of always cocky as far as that goes, and just Mike Tomlin did an incredible job at hiding it. But exactly, I mean, the fact of the matter was he was always crazy, but he kept it under wraps, and he was very kind of reserved about it up until he got his big payday. and then he gets the payday, and then obviously he gets his entire brain rearranged by Vontaze Burfict in a playoff game, and that probably doesn't help things either. But I do see what you're talking about, because Kyrie Irving, it really does seem like he treats basketball as a secondary thing. And does he do? And I'm not a fan of Kyrie Irving. Does he do some good things? Absolutely. Some of his activism and things like that. He does stand in some ways for good causes. But when you're talking about him in general, when you're talking about a guy who recently got caught for retweeting Alex Jones things and saying how it seems like he's a guy who just wants to grab headlines. He's not focused on what's on the court.
And not to bring it back to my honorary pick, but Patrick Mahomes, that's the reason why I almost picked him as well, because he hit all the news for making the no look throws and scrambling all around for 20 seconds and then throwing a deep pass that gets a touchdown or something. He did it. Everyone went crazy about it, and then he tried to keep doing it when he couldn't. He threw a lot of interceptions last year. I think it was last year at least. He threw a lot of interceptions, trying to do that same stuff. There was one, I think, in the playoffs that people got really mad at him about, because it was an interception to lose the game. And if you watch him, he does the no-look pass into an interception. So it's, kind of just play the game. Go be good, be the best you can be, play the game.
Cam, Trev, any remarks?
Something that may also help your claim, Logan, is that other than knowing that Kyrie Irving exists and he plays basketball, the only thing I know about him himself is him shooting that game winner of Game 7. That is it. But looking at his stats, he seems like a solid player, but based on what you guys say and the little knowledge that I have about him, and the only thing I'd heard about him is him making that one shot, I totally agree that this guy is a good pick for being overrated.
And I want to say this too, literally, we're not saying he's same thing. Again, with all these players, we're not saying they are bad players. Literally, Cam had in a segment in the first episode of this entire podcast, he had the LeBron James block as the most clutch play of all time, but Kyrie's shot was right below it. And when you're talking about it again, Kyrie Irving's Game 7 shot against the Warriors over Stephen Curry's outstretched arm is one of, if not the most clutch shot in NBA history. But again, like I said, to me, a lot of his career, in my mind, and I follow the NBA very closely. I'm a huge basketball fan in general. A lot of his career has been carried by that one shot.
And in general, the NBA has kind of exploded in popularity since around the Steph Curry era. It was getting a lot of views. It was getting really popular, especially with children. And this isn't me saying anything bad about that, but the average height in the United States is below 6 foot. And point guards look like 4 foot midgets against 7 foot tall centers. You know what I mean? So, they kind of see Kyrie Irving out there. And how tall is Kyrie? Kyrie, I
believe, is 6'1", but I could be mistaken about that. It could be a little taller than that.
His Basketball Reference has him at 6'2". That makes him just a little bit taller than I am. When you see him on the court being all short like that, when you're a short person, which is the average in the United States, which is below 6 foot, which is how you feel when you're watching a game, seeing a point guard against these giants, you feel kind of related to that. And I think that's why point guards are so popular, because the average height, like I said, below 6 foot. These guys look below 6 foot, even though they're not. A lot of people get stunned when they realize Steph Curry is 6'3". Like he is still tall.
Yeah, a lot of the population will be looking up at Stephen Curry, but when you look at him in the NBA, because he doesn't have a ton of weight on his bones with muscles, and he relies so much on offensive game. Like you said, people legitimately think he is 4'5" out there playing against. He's a dwarf playing against giants. All right, Cam, Trev, any other last remarks, or Logan, any last points to make?
I don't think this is a bad pick considering the last year he had, mostly just because of the games he missed. That's like the biggest reason I can consider him overrated, because like when he plays, I think he's really good. Like, but availability is obviously important, and when you don't get to see I'll say a generational talent point guard play over 3/4 of the season, it's kind of hard to sit there and say he's one of the best.
And so, go ahead, Logan.
Quick question: when they played in the playoffs against Boston, did they get swept?
They did. They lost 4-0
Okay.
to the Celtics.
Okay, because I couldn't remember. I knew there was this debate because obviously the reason he missed a lot of those games was because per league rules, the COVID vaccination, he wouldn't get it. So per the league rules, he could only play in games in New York. And I think
It was
at
flipped.
around
It was flipped.
Was it flipped?
He
could
could.
only play away games.
Yeah, so it was the local mandate that said you had to be vaccinated in order to play, and
Okay.
basically he could only play away games, and then he could only play away games where that was not a thing. So, like for example, he couldn't play in Toronto because that was going. Canada had a
Into a
strict thing
different
about
country.
it, and then he couldn't play against the Knicks. Things like that. He could, but any other stadium he went to, he was allowed to play.
Okay, because at around the time the playoffs started, I don't know. I don't want to go into politics. I don't really follow it very much, but I think they had gotten a new mayor or something.
The mandate was
And
lifted right before the playoffs
It was
started.
lifted, yeah. So he was able to play against Boston, and everyone was like, "Oh, now that Kyrie's able to play every game, we'll go to the playoffs." And then they got swept by Boston.
They did, and it was the other big thing was Ben Simmons. Was people wanted him to make his debut for the Nets in Game 4, really Game 3 and Game 4.
As a Sixers fan, I've got some things to say about Ben Simmons, but I'll keep that for another time.
So you could say he was Game 3 and Game 4, but he sat out for both of them. And yes, the Nets ended up getting swept. Even though KD played out of his mind in Game 4, they got swept by the eventual finals runner-up, Boston Celtics. All right, so far we've got Devin Booker, Fernando Tatis Jr., and Kyrie Irving. I've went ahead and spun the wheel. If anybody needs to see it on the screen, I've got it here. It's going to land on Cam. So, Cam, open it up. Floor is all yours.
So, we've had some hot takes so far, and I know this one's probably going to rile up some people, but I'm choosing Ezekiel Elliott, running back for the Cowboys. And I'll just be honest, my biggest reason for saying that he is overrated is purely by the fact of how much he is paid. He is the highest paid running back, paid more than people like Dalvin Cook, Joe Mixon, Derrick Henry, Saquon, really good running backs. And don't get me wrong, Ezekiel Elliott for the first 3 years of his career was a really great running back. I mean, his rookie year was astounding. Uh, But obviously, after he had signed his contract, or after he had got off his rookie contract, like many other running backs, he eventually kind of fell downhill. Um, this year, he's really not having a great year so far. 5 games, has 300 yards, 1 touchdown. The backup for Dallas, Tony Pollard, has almost 40 less rushing attempts and is only 50 yards behind him and has 1 more touchdown, so that's not really good. And like I'd said, like Zeke is not a bad player by any means, but I just don't think you can really consider him a top. I don't even know if you can really consider him a top 10 running back anymore. And I'll just be honest, like I just genuinely don't think he's a top 10 running back anymore in the NFL.
So Zeke brings in an interesting question, and it's the same concept that a lot of teams have asked every single season with the draft. And there have been teams here recently that have been dealing with it. It's, do you draft a running back in the first round? Not only with with Zeke, it wasn't just do you draft him in the first round. They drafted him number 4 overall, and this was coming after a very, very good career at Ohio State. Ended up winning a national championship there in the first college football playoff. But in the recent years, I would even go as far as just to say that Zeke is being outperformed this year by Tony Pollard. He's been outperformed by Tony Pollard for the past 2 years. And last year, Pollard was a very, very good back in the backup position. And of course, he's also a receiving back, which that's not what Zeke does. He's never been a receiving style back. But Pollard, for what he's been able to do, and you see this all the time once again with a lot of first round running backs. I mean, there's questions within the Steelers fan base right now about Najee Harris, and you see sometimes it can work out. You look at a guy like Todd Gurley, who for a long time had some very successful years with the Los Angeles Rams. But at the end of the day, like you said, the money he gets paid, the performances that he's put up, he doesn't have the offensive line that he used to anymore. And I'm saying that as in that's a bad thing for him because obviously you're starting to see the cracks and you're starting to wonder if it's the same thing. I don't think it's funny to me because for the longest time Ezekiel Elliott got the fanfare and got the praise for being a top 5 running back in the league, but DeMarco Murray never got that level of praise. He never got that level of fanfare, even though he had similar stats, if not better, behind the same offensive line. Am I sitting here and saying that DeMarco Murray deserved to be in that same category? Not in my opinion, but neither did Zeke, if DeMarco Murray doesn't either.
See, the biggest thing for me right now is just like, if Zeke didn't get paid the amount of money he did, I don't know if I'd be having this argument, but the only counter argument I think I have is that I think the running back position is the easiest position to try and say that someone is overrated in. And my biggest argument right now is that, like, yes, Najee Harris this season is not performing well at all, but the difference between the Steelers and the Dallas Cowboys is the Dallas Cowboys are actually winning games and actually being able to stay in games, unlike Pittsburgh. So Zeke should, in theory, be able to be used way more than Pittsburgh is able to use Najee Harris, just for the pure fact of when you're down by 15, 20 points, you can't really run the ball.
The other thing I will say too is you're talking about Zeke being Zeke being paid as much as he is. The thing about running backs, and there is also a theme around the league that the only reason you extend a running back or you pay them big money is if they are a future Hall of Famer. Again, you don't. There's a reason why a lot of teams you go through and you look at some of the best. Let's go through some of the best running backs in the league. Derrick Henry, I believe, was a second round pick. Alvin Kamara was a second round pick. Dalvin Cook was a second round pick. They were not first round, front of the line, top of the line guys. It was not people fawning all over themselves to pick them early in the first round. And Zeke, and you sit here and you think about guys once again. Did Zeke have enough of the stats, have the success to get the money he made and the contract he got from Dallas? And realistically, when you look at the amount running backs make and things like that, and for the contracts that people let running backs go on, no, I do agree. I don't think he was deserving of the contract he got either.
So me being not extremely knowledgeable in NFL, hasn't Dallas had a recent history of overpaying their players who aren't performing?
In some cases, it depends on who it is. Now, you could say Dak Prescott, but Dak Prescott's more so because of injury. It hasn't been.
Oh, okay.
He hasn't necessarily. When he's been on the field and he's playing, he actually plays really well, but he just can't see the field right now because he had a horrendous injury last year, and then he's working on. I believe it's a wrist injury that he's going to be coming back from here soon. But And then you look at guys like Amari Cooper, who ended up getting traded to Cleveland this past year, and he was solid. He was a fine receiver. Maybe not worth the amount of money they gave him, but still a very solid receiver in his own right. Other than that, I mean, the defense at times, now there's going to be players that Micah Parsons, I don't even want to know how much money they're going to have to give him when everything's when he's off his rookie contract, because it's going to be outrageous. But they've had some hits and misses.
Okay. I guess Dak Prescott was the other big name that I know they paid a lot of money for. And I guess because of his injury, he hasn't quite produced overall throughout his contract currently the numbers that they kind of want. But it's understandable. He's injured. But I totally agree, Cam. If a running back, if your primary running back that you're paying a lot of money for is, I would say, with those current stats that you listed, being outperformed by his understudy who is getting paid less, like there needs to be like some money, like some starting position discussion, because I don't know, from like a team standpoint, I feel like it's kind of unacceptable.
I am looking at it right now just to compare, and again, when you talked about it, the stats wise, Tony Pollard's not that far behind. When you look at the contracts and things like that here, Tony Pollard in the upcoming season is going to be making, at a base salary, $965,000. And the bonus that he'll get with it is $167,000. In the upcoming season for Ezekiel Elliott, he's going to be making as a base salary $12.4 million and $5.8 million as a bonus. And it only increases from there. The last year of his contract, which is in 2026, he'll be making $16 million from the Dallas Cowboys. And again, I agree with you, Kim, because that's not a contract you see given to anybody in the NFL. So clearly the Dallas Cowboys thought they had something huge with Zeke, and it just hasn't turned out that way.
I've got a couple things that seem pretty interesting. First off, in his rookie season, had over 16,000 yards. 2 years later, he had 14,000 yards. Both of those seasons he played and started for 15 games.
I think you mean 1,400 and 1,600. Just
what did I say?
16,000 and 14,000.
Now you're breaking records.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Might be.
You're good. Like us, no, you're good. That's why I just wanted to make sure. I was like, did I miss something, or is he the greatest football player of all time? But
nah, you good. Might be. All right. So, yeah. Whoa, that's crazy. But that was in 2016 and 2018. In 2021, he played 2 extra games, but had 400 yards less than the 2018, 600 yards less than the 2016. And you could say it's down to touches, but his rookie year, he had 354 touches, which was less than he had in 2018. And he had more yards that year. I mean, another thing was in 2017, he only played 10 games and almost had 1,000 yards at that point. And if he would have been able to play, I think he would have had another phenomenal year. But it just, from then on, it just kept dropping every single year. And another just interesting little tidbit that I found, in 2016, which was his rookie year, he was voted number 4 in the NFL AP MVP voting. He was also voted 5th in the Offensive Player of the Year voting. But he got second place in Rookie of the Year to Dak Prescott, who was in neither of those. I just think that's kind of weird.
Yeah, those awards are weird just because it's a quarterback-driven thing. Now, Offensive Player of the Year, it was one of those things. And plus, the other reason people wanted Dak to win Rookie of the Year was because of the story That was when Tony Romo got hurt, had another back injury, and Dak Prescott came in, and they went 13-3, went all the way to the playoffs, and then got beat by Aaron Rodgers on one of the greatest throws you'll ever see a quarterback make. But regardless, I think the reason Dak won the Offensive Rookie of the Year that year was more so for the story, not necessarily because statistically Zeke was the better player. But long story short, with everything you said as well, like you said, there was a stretch in time where Zeke was a solid running back, was a really good running back. But in years, I think he had some injury history and some injury issues. But once again, you have to take that into consideration. And the fact that the Cowboys gave him that money is something that I think is going to haunt them for quite some time. Because, again, this is just I had it pulled up. I believe this is just year two. Year two of like 6 years that they're going to be paying this money.
A free agent, I think, and I think it's 2026.
2026 is the last year on his deal.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just be honest, like, Ezekiel Elliott's not going to... I mean, he might perform average at best for the next year or two, but it's just, I don't know, you really shouldn't extend the running back for that period of time. I'll just be honest, like, it's just not a smart move considering the way that running back injuries have occurred in the NFL. It's just not something that a team really wants to do. Running backs, especially, like, nowadays, honestly, don't even get off the rookie contract before they sign with a new team.
Times are changing, as they say. And again, in the NFL today especially, you go back and you look at some older running backs, and even then, their careers didn't last, unless you have a guy like Emmitt Smith, who was an Iron Man, who played for like 18 seasons or whatever it was in the NFL. But you look at a guy like Barry Sanders, only played like 10 seasons, I believe, in the NFL. Walter Payton didn't play all that long. And then you even look at the guys from now. And the thing about running backs that is so amazing is the drop-off is so severe. I mean,
Le'Veon Bell was drafted 9 years ago.
I'll give you another example. I don't think there's the only person you could say that was in this person's stratosphere as a running back in our lifetimes was Adrian Peterson. And in his height, Adrian Peterson was an MVP, was an unbelievable player. LaDainian Tomlinson looked like one of the best running backs, one of the best football players I had ever seen when he played for the San Diego Chargers. And he was unbelievable. You bought Madden to go play as LT, and that was pretty much it. Then towards the end of his Chargers career, he ends up signing with the Jets. And again, this once unbelievable running back, and you're thinking, oh my God, this guy's going to be one of the greatest players of all time. And all of a sudden, he's a backup on the not great New York Jets. And it's like, what happened? And the same thing for Adrian Peterson, for that matter. Again, Adrian Peterson had over 2,000 rushing yards in a season. It's an unbelievable stat. And then you look up, and he's struggling to stay in a team with, like, the Detroit Lions and Washington. I mean, it's crazy to think, but the drop-off with running backs is so severe due to the hits they take, the physical stress that goes into it. And it's crazy to think that Dallas didn't see that coming at least a little bit with Zeke. Is there still time for him to turn it around and become a really good running back? Absolutely. I have more doubts than I have hope in that case.
As of right now, Pro Football Reference, they kind of look at all the stats of players like that, and they have a ability to show you players that are kind of similar in stature of their career. And Ezekiel Elliott's most similar player is Willie Parker from the
Fast
Steelers.
Willie Parker. And
that's fair, though. That's pretty fair. I
and
mean,
Willie Parker, average, yeah.
Sometimes a little above, sometimes a little below. I mean, that's just part of it.
Fun fact, Willie Parker owns the record for the longest rushing touchdown in Super Bowl history. That is a thing. He broke it against the Seattle Seahawks. Anyways, any last remarks from anybody before we get to the voting, or are we all good to go?
I'm ready. Thing.
All right. So refreshing for those of you listening at home. Once again, I have brought to the table Devin Booker. This is the most overrated athlete in current times. I have brought to the table Devin Booker. Trevor brought Fernando Tatis Jr. Logan brought in Kyrie Irving, and Cam brought in Ezekiel Elliott. So I see all of you are sending me your picks right now. I am going to go ahead and spin the wheel, revealing the first pick on the podcast will be Trevor's pick. And so as I open it up, the vote goes to Cameron and Ezekiel Elliott. Trev, explain yourself and why'd you pick Ezekiel Elliott?
So, I guess the big reason is this guy got a big boy contract, getting paid millions and millions of dollars to be, from my uneducated NFL perspective, a mediocre to kind of good running back. And compared to the one running back who is under him, who's getting paid like less than 10% of what Elliott is getting paid, is putting up comparable numbers with fewer touches. And I don't know, compared to like all of the others, the other two that you, Blake, and Logan brought up, this one kind of resonated with me because like he used to do really well. He put up like really good numbers in the past couple of years, especially his first couple of years, 2016 through 2018 and such. And he's just kind of been like dropping off. When was his current contract signed?
It was 21, I think. Cam, you can fact check me on that.
Like it was like 2021 season. It's
okay.
Football. I don't know what actual year it would be actually signed, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's just looking from the pure stats. If he were putting up numbers from like 2017, then like I totally understand how much they're trying to pay him. But like just looking at his numbers from 2020, 2021, like I don't think he's worth that money at all.
So one vote for Cam and Ezekiel Elliott. As I spin the wheel, it will land on. It's gonna be close. It'll land on Logan. So Logan will have his vote revealed next, and it is Cameron. And so Cameron at least clinches a co-championship this week with Ezekiel Elliott. Logan, explain yourself and why you picked Ezekiel Elliott.
So I'm not gonna lie, this one's it's just kind of personal, you know, like Zeke, he's just overrated. He really is. When it comes down, he had a good season. I could see why they wanted to give him that money, but I think it came down to like when it came down to the money. I think, he was doing good. I think he should have got paid more than his rookie contract at the time, but it was kind of around that time Le'Veon Bell had held out to get paid big by the Steelers, and he saw that happen, and then he did it himself, and they paid him. They just did, and I think I just don't understand it, as someone who doesn't make that kind of money. I think he did that and just fell off, didn't do anything with it. And there's kind of a reason why there's a stereotype of when you pay your running backs, they just become bad. I mean, and stereotypes, it comes from in these sports, it comes from that being a little bit truthful.
So 2 votes for Cam. Again, he has clinched at least a share of this week's championship roll, Discord, whatever it is. As I spin the wheel one more time, it will land on Cam. And so Cam's vote will be revealed next. It will be myself. So Cam picks Devin Booker, as most overrated player in sports. Cam, what was it about Devin Booker that made you pick him?
Well, I mentioned earlier that the 70, I think it was a 70 or 71 point game.
It is a 70-point game.
70 point. I think that 70-point game really I think it really made people talk about him more. Like, I don't know. Like, we had talked about Devin Booker is not a bad player by any means. I just don't think he's top 10, top 15 play. Well, top 15 maybe, but top 10, I just don't see it 100%. I just don't think he has the capability to really lead his team to, like, another deep playoff run. I think Chris Paul had a big deal with that. And, like, obviously every NBA player needs help. I just don't think Devin Booker right now is where he needs to be. Like, 100% not a Hall of Fame player, and he definitely acts like he is. So that's just my biggest thing is if you're going to talk the talk, you got to pretty much back it up, and he just doesn't have any of the accolades to really show for it.
So 1 vote for Devin Booker, 2 for Ezekiel Elliott. Cam has already clinched the win for this week outright. Again, I am not allowed to vote for myself, but I am going to go ahead and just give who I think, again, would get my vote in general. And this was actually, I will go ahead and say, the person that I'm picking here chose an athlete that I thought about, that I did give some serious consideration. It's going to Logan. Again, I think each one of you had good points. You know, Trev with Tatis, once again, for everything. The biggest, the fact that he's never on the field, and it's not necessarily just for injury, it's for things that could easily be avoided. I think that's 100% something that deserves to be talked about and deserves to be taken into consideration when you're talking about the most overrated player in sports. And then Cam with Ezekiel Elliott, again, I agree, especially when you bring in his contract situation and the amount of money he makes just to be basically outshined by Tony Pollard. It's ludicrous. But you should have known I was going to vote for Logan when I came in with the take about, again, that the fact that one shot has carried Kyrie Irving's career. I think at the end of the day, the impact that he has had on basketball, yes, he's a lot more free-flowing. Yes, he's one of the greatest ball handlers that we've ever seen, like we said. But again, when you're talking about a player from an offensive standpoint, or from really an all-around-the-court standpoint, he had one good run in the playoffs. And people say what they want about, you know, if Kyrie Irving is healthy when they make the finals the first time against the Warriors in 2015, they probably beat them. And that may be true at the end of the day. But Kyrie, he's only really shown up in one big moment, and that is the moment. And it's a great moment. It's one of the greatest in NBA history, and he will be remembered as a great for that reason. But without that shot and without that moment, Kyrie Irving, in my opinion, is not a top 20 NBA player at really at any point in his career. And I think that at the end of the day, I have to take that into consideration. So Logan gets my vote, but that brings the totals to Cam with 2 votes on the week, and he will be the outright champion with Ezekiel Elliott. So Cowboys fans, all your hate goes to Cam. Be sure to direct that towards him. And yeah, with that being said, Ezekiel Elliott, in our opinion, the most overrated athlete in sports today. Cam, any last remarks for your championship winning week?
Feed Zeke.
Feed Zeke. And the Cowboys, again, now that it's astounding that they have only lost one game with Cooper. They've only lost one game of the season, and Cooper Rush is their starting quarterback. We'll see if they can continue to do it, as they still have the Eagles in their division, who are looking ridiculously good. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, Ezekiel Elliott probably going to be benched here soon for Tony Pollard. Yeah, that's basically going to do it for this week. As is customary, the Discord role goes to Cam for the week, and he will be bringing the topic to the table for next week's show. Again, if it comes down to, we'll have that. This show should be uploaded about Thursday night, and then we're looking to get back on that weekly schedule. So again, Cam will bring that topic to the table, and we will do it all over again. Yeah, that's basically going to do it for us. So if you're watching out there on Twitch, this episode was broadcasted live on Twitch, so be sure to hit the follow button on the Twitch channel. Be sure to check out, turn on notifications so you know whenever we're live with the shows. You get early sneak peeks and you get early previews of the show. And if you're listening on Spotify and YouTube, you can check us out on Twitch, Nuggets Nation 21, and once again, vice versa, Taking Heat on Spotify, Nuggets Nation 21 on Twitch and on YouTube. Yeah, that's basically going to do it, and I'll just go ahead and jump on in. So Cam is the champion, and you can look for his topic in the upcoming week. So for my co-hosts, Cameron Woolwine, Trevor Tidwell, and Logan Porter. My name is Blake Holmes. Thank you for spending your evening with us here on Twitch and whatever platform you're listening on, and we hope to see you again here soon. So, have a great week, everyone. We'll see you next week.